I'm super excited about our next guest, too. I had lunch with him yesterday. Good friend of mine, did a show with him for over a decade, and just loved doing radio with the guy, and was talking to him briefly about the Jon Gruden situation. I said, man, if there's one guy that would know exactly what it's like in the National Football League, certainly from a player standpoint, it would be Al Del Greco. Al, what's up, baby? How are you?
Good morning, Bone. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thank you so much for joining the Kurre and Klapow show. Josh is here. I know he's got a plethora of questions for you. First of all, you told me yesterday you are now 4 times a grandpa. Congratulations there.
Thank you. Yep. Derek, my youngest, just had one, 2 weeks ago. The last one's 2 weeks old. So 4 grandsons, and loving every minute of spending time with them.
You're going to have to grow bigger kneecaps. You're going to be how many quarters you pulling out of kids' ears these days?
Yeah, well, that and the quarters for the claw machine's going to be big.
Yes.
No doubt.
Let me ask. What do they call you? What are you?
Yes.
My full name is Albert, and basically my son-in-law came up with Bert.
Oh, I
so
like that.
all of them call me Bert, and I absolutely love it.
Al, that is great. Like, no, I've never heard that one.
That is so,
We've always heard every other. I've heard every other one. That's perfect.
I love that. And you're also doing, of course, the Sanford golf situation. You're the coach there. I'm almost afraid to ask how many years you've been doing that, and how's the team doing?
This is my 8th year.
Gosh.
And we got a great group of kids that work really, really hard. We're kind of young this year, so there's a lot of learning still going on as far as course management and just, different times to be aggressive and not aggressive. But we just finished 6th out of 15 teams at Georgia State's tournament over in Atlanta, and we go to Atlanta again this weekend for another chance to get better again. So proud of what they're doing. They work hard. They're great kids. They're awesome in the classroom. We were academic All-American as a team last year, and I think I had 4 guys that were academic All-Americans. So proud of what they do and the way they go about their business.
That's fantastic. Aldo Greco, 20-year vet in the National Football League, and my good friend, a guy I did a show with, of course, with Jay Barker in the opening drive for about 12 or 13 years. We had a great run and loved talking to him on the Kurre and Klapow show. We know in the National Football League, everyone's bigger, faster, stronger. I don't know how players back in the 60s and 70s would fare against these 300-pounders playing today. But I did text you over the weekend. The Green Bay Packers-Cincinnati Bengals game was breaking my heart. There were 5 field goals missed. I think was it the last 2 minutes of the game and then overtime. I'd never seen anything like it. And then on that heels, we had a guy who broke the record, nailing a 66-yarder as a excellent kicker yourself. And, of course, when we started our show, I believe you were top 10 in points in history in the National Football League at one point. Your thoughts on what you're seeing in the National Football League from a kicking standpoint? What in the hell's happening?
Yeah, Justin Tucker, you're talking about, had the 66-yarder, phenomenal. He's probably the best, if not one of the best, in the NFL right now. I mean, you could probably argue a couple guys, but he's been so consistent, so strong, has made a lot of long field goals like that. Incredible to watch. Happy for him. And to think, 66 yards. We saw 63 from Tom Dempsey last for so long. And then I think there were 4 guys that either tied that or beat it by a yard. It'll be crazy to see how long this record stands. And then the Cincinnati game you're talking about, I turned it on right when the McPherson kid for the Bengals hit the 56-yarder that hit the upright. And then
hold on. Have you ever missed a field goal that you thought was good and celebrated? Because that was it was so hard to watch because he thought it was good and it was not good. It hit the tape. Have you ever celebrated a field goal you actually missed?
I never celebrated until I saw what the referee said.
There you go.
Yeah, that was kind of weird to watch him jump in the arms of the holder, knowing that it wasn't any good. But yeah, that was just such an odd thing that these guys are so good today. And I would say where Mason Crosby's concerned, you have to look at where this guy has kicked in the weather that he's kicked in, what his career stats are like, and what he's done for that football team is absolutely amazing. He had made 27 in a row And I would say that the 36-yarder he missed with a little over 2 minutes to go, that was probably one that you could put on him and he'd be the first to tell you. But the 49-yarder he hit really, really well, and it missed by about a foot. And then he made the 42-yarder to actually win the game at the end. But man, to see that happen going back and forth, it was like, okay, we're going to run 3 plays, miss a field goal. You're going to get great field position. Then we're going to run 3 or 4 plays, and then we're going to miss a field goal, and then you're going to get great field position. It was something to watch. It was crazy.
Even the announcer said, "Well, they're now in field goal range, but I don't know if that's a good thing or not." Speaking of Mason Crosby, did you ever go through a situation in your career where I don't want to call it the yips, but there was something technical, something with your hips or something that you were just missing and you just could not figure it out for a period of time, why I'm not making these field goals that I know I can make?
Not really. I think the most I ever missed in a row, I know in a game was 2 in a row. The most I ever missed in a game was 3, period. And then week to week, I don't think it ever lasted very long, thank goodness. Probably why I stayed around so long. But again, Tony, I don't know if it was something technical or you're talking about a 49-yard field goal that there's guys rushing, there's a snap, there's a hold. The ball's not put down the same every single time. And like I said, he missed the 49-yarder by a foot and then made the other one, the 36-yarder he just pulled. I think what made that so, I think, interesting and unbelievable to everybody was just it was the back and forth. And then also he had missed an extra point earlier in the game. So it just gave them kind of the narrative to talk about, wow, this is a guy that made 27 in a row. What's going on? We've never seen this before. And it kind of just amplified everything, to be honest with you.
Aldo Greco joins us here on the Kurre and Klapow show. If you missed any of this interview, you can podcast it later on tomorrow, and you can certainly listen to our show again later on tonight for a replay between 6 and 8. And I love Al. He's like a brother of mine, and I did a show with him for years, and just great having him on the radio again. All right, so I want to talk about this Jon Gruden situation. I was over at Jay's show Tuesday, and he was telling a quick story. I think he was up going to Tennessee for a football game in college. And he said at one point prior to a game, the team was on one end of the end zone, and the Tennessee volunteer cheerleaders were running stairs for some reason at that end of the Neyland Stadium. And he said they knew exactly what they were doing. They were trying to mess up our rhythm. They were trying because they were all beautiful. They were running up the stairs very slowly. They were coming back down the other side. And every guy who was on the field could not concentrate or practice our plays. And I kind of laughed about it. And he's like, yeah, that was kind of a dirty ploy, but it worked because they got out of the box a little slow in that particular game. You were in locker rooms for nearly 2 decades in the National Football League. I know there's certain protocols where you're not allowed to date cheerleaders. You're not probably even allowed to carouse with them or have drinks with them. Can you kind of give me just a little bit of a background of how that works? And I know whenever you get 100 guys in a locker room together, there's going to be some things said. But what was your experience in the National Football League when it came to women?
Well, you're right. I mean, right off the bat, there was the rule that there was no interacting with any of the cheerleaders. There really wasn't a whole lot of time that I remember, Tony, that you actually even saw them other than when they were at the game.
Yep.
I know that the Titans cheerleaders used to practice at night at our facility, but we were long gone before they ever started. Obviously I can remember back in the day, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders were always, the epitome of what it was all about. They probably still are. They have their own TV show about the way they go about picking the girls and all that. I can remember going out to LA to play the Raiders, and the cheerleaders had just like a little trailer, like a construction trailer sitting there right at the entrance to where you go into that tunnel in the old LA Coliseum, and warm-ups and all the other thing. They're coming in and out of the tunnel. And I mean, every one of them was like a model out in LA. They were absolutely beautiful. So yeah, it was kind of distracting, But it obviously we're in a different era now, and what the things that Jon Gruden came out with, no way to condone any of that. But they were said in 2011, I think in 2018, life was different back then. I just, it's just kind of crazy. And you think 650,000 emails in this Washington football team investigation, with their cheerleaders and what went on there, and this gets leaked. It just makes you wonder what else was in those emails. And I think some of the cheerleaders have filed a lawsuit to say, look, I think they owe it to all of us to publish everything that was in those emails. And I don't know why they, picked Jon Gruden and what he had, and that's what got leaked. But certainly in today's day and age, you're accountable for anything you put on social media. And, he got caught with it years later.
And listen, we're talking to Alda Greco, 20-year vet in the National Football League, and my good friend, and we did a show together for over a decade. I realize that when you get 100 guys in a locker room, there's a lot of testosterone, and you're beating guys up all day long, and you're men, and I get all those things, and you certainly played under some wonderful coaches, including one of my favorite, Forrest Gregg. You also played under Jeff Fisher with the Tennessee Titans. You played with the Houston Oilers. Did it surprise you, based on what you know about Jon Gruden, that these things are said, and even more so that it was put in writing?
Yeah, and I think I agree with you there. The fact that he put it in an email is probably the part that is most damaging to him. In locker room talk, and you guys have been in locker rooms at some level, but locker room talk, there's a lot of stuff that's thrown back and forth in a locker room that's either demeaning to one another or to other people, or it's just kind of I don't want to call it the lingo. And again, I'm going back 20 years now from when I was in a locker room. It may be completely different now, but there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of thrown out there that I'm not going to say it's what your beliefs actually are. It's more of just the talk of the locker room, I guess.
Okay, so this is really interesting. Because my psychologist in the room's about ready to blow up here. So did you see guys that you knew weren't either biased, racist, misogynistic, or sexist, or whatever? Outside, I mean, you'd see a guy throwing out F-bombs and talking about a hot chick he saw in section 312, and then right after the game, he's hanging out with his wife and 3 kids. You obviously saw a lot of that, right?
Oh, there's no question that happened. Sure. The thing is the racist part and all that. I don't know. I'm not going to use that extreme, because you always had respect for the guys that were in the locker room with you. And I think you've heard Keyshawn and Randy Moss talk about the brotherhood of what's in there. And when you're in a locker room, obviously there's black and white, and there's, you want to say Hispanic or whatever, but that's never really a thought. It's never really something that's a conscious thought, because you're all in there to work at one goal. You're all doing something. You're all relying on one another. And I think, maybe outside of the locker room, people maybe had different kind of thoughts of stuff, but the respect that you had for your teammates was just different when you were in that locker room and when you were all together.
Is it too much to ask to separate those things? I mean, I get it. I mean, I understand. I mean, I feel comfortable around Dr. Josh, and we're dropping F-bombs in the morning and how the heck we're teasing each other. And obviously I wouldn't act like that outside the studio or on air, but is it asking too much? And it's weird, because being a professional athlete, when you work out all day and you're 320 pounds and you are full of juice and you're out there just to pound the other person in the face, I understand that to an extent, how that's a manly kind of thing, but then you're asked to tone it down quite a bit and be the real person. And that's where I kind of saw the Jon Gruden situation. I can imagine him speaking like that. If we had tape running or video running in every locker room, I think some fans would absolutely, their minds would be blown.
There's no question. And I do think there is a separation there. Again, I think when you step in that locker room and on the football field and what you're trying to do as a group, I think there's just a different level of respect. I would venture to say there's plenty of people that work in corporate America
Mm-hmm.
that do the same thing when they go in an office every day. They may have, one way of thinking about things outside of the office, and then when they get in the office, obviously, it's just not the right thing to do. But the problem is you put that in writing, like in an email or something that could be brought back to you now years later, and we live in a different society. The Me Too movement and everything else that's gone on, they're just looking for stuff to kind of make this a giant narrative that blows up in somebody's face.
So Al, one of the things I was thinking about, because Tony kind of lumps this together, and I know he doesn't mean to, but the dropping F-bombs and whatever else. But is there a line? Because this is what I'm hearing from you. Is there a line in the locker room, an unspoken line about what you don't say? Because to me, the Gruden, the comments that he made in writing, would you ever hear those in the locker room? Those kinds of comments.
Yeah. Give me a specific of which line though, because I mean there were.
Did anyone ever call someone a faggot in the locker room?
Because they were.
Yeah, he's making a really good point right here. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, not in the way that you were talking to somebody that may have been homosexual. No,
right.
But I mean, you've yelled that or other things at people, a lot. I mean, growing up, that again, I'm not condoning
no
word or the action, but I mean, that was thrown out a lot at people, but it didn't really, you weren't throwing it around with the meaning of the word. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, that's kind of why I was asking you, because you said you're in there together for a single goal. So whether you think it or not, there's a difference. At least it feels like there would be a difference in the locker room between the kind of comments that Jon Gruden put in writing, whether you believed it or not or whatever, and what you would hear in the locker room. And I guess that's what I'm asking, or even go broader. Were there certain areas where you just didn't go because you didn't do that in the locker room?
Or was there anybody in your locker room that was off limits? I mean, I talked to Jay. We obviously know Jay, and he's a good Christian guy. And while the guys were out there boozing up and down the strip, Jay was like, "I'm going back to my dorm. I'm not going to do that." And he, as far as I know, wasn't pressured into doing anything that he felt like he had to do because he was a leader on that football team. Where there's some guys, much like corporate America, that you just stayed away from.
No, not really. I mean, I think you knew. You kind of had an idea of what everybody's background was like. And again, we're going back 20 years when, I mean, there weren't a whole lot of players that had come out at that time, and even expressed that. And there was a guy for the, he played for the Falcons, Ezra something, that was probably late in my career when he came out. He actually sang the national anthem at one of the games when we played the Falcons and was phenomenal. But there were so many guys that at that time had not come out and said every day when they went to work, there were things that were said in the locker room that absolutely made them very uncomfortable and made it very hard for them to come out at all. I think that's why you have to look at the I don't know if you want to call it bravery or just the human side of the guys that have said, look, this is what I am. This is how I feel. I'm coming out and doing this, and I'm going to let everybody know and let all my teammates know. And again, we're in a different place now where that's concerned in the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because, I like Jon Gruden. I thought he did a great job at ESPN, and I wanted to see him. I think he was good for the league. He's got the scowl. He's Chucky. He's everything we thought him, and now he's been taken off of the Madden games. He's been out of the Ring of Honor, and I don't know if he'll ever come back from that. Greco joins us here, 20-year vet in the National Football League, and, of course, a good friend of mine. We did a show together, the opening drive with Jay Barker for about 12 or 13 years. We had an interesting show a couple days ago about how women are objectified. And I mentioned yesterday we had lunch, and if a beautiful woman walked in, you could probably hear a spoon hit the floor, and we'd all have our tongues out. And that's what guys do. It's not necessarily right or wrong. You can look at it. You can enjoy beauty. You can enjoy what God put on this earth. When you talk about these Washington team cheerleaders, and some of the current ones and some of the former cheerleaders are coming out saying, listen, we were in very compromised situations, but we were shooting calendars. We were doing behind the scenes. What's it take? And you mentioned the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader show. We watch it. It's a great documentary. It's fun to watch, but they know what they're shooting. I can certainly make an argument that every time I'm watching a Dallas Cowboy game on television, that going into every commercial break, I'm going to see the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders doing leg kicks. I mean, you're going to see that, and there's a reason for that. When I'm watching an Alabama or an Auburn football game, and they have a little bit of a slow time, they're going to pick out a couple girls wearing houndstooth hats with midriffs on that are attractive, that are in the stands. Okay, why aren't you showing two ugly people? We know that. We understand that. And so from an objective, and I think as a guy, and I hope I can speak for all three of us, we kind of feel like, and this is wrong, we kind of feel like that you are being objectified because you're a cheerleader. You're beautiful. There are no ugly cheerleaders. They're not. And you're very talented. I'm not saying you're not a great cheerleader. You're great at what you do. But if you are willing to change clothes and do bikini shoots and everything, we think that you're basically free range. We think we can objectify you, and it's just not that way anymore. It's never been that way, but it's certainly not that way now.
No, I think there's a huge difference in appreciating somebody's beauty and having behind the scenes video of naked girls changing and doing all the rest of the stuff. I think that's not even close to being the same thing. And no, my understanding in this investigation was they knew full well what they were doing during all this. It was set up that way for them to get that video, and then again to pass the video around and different things. That's where it's way taboo. And I mean, there's no way you can condone that kind of action at all. But I certainly think, where cheerleaders are concerned, that, like you said, Tony, from the beginning of time, it was always the prettiest girls. It was always, the ones that were very easy on the eyes to look at. And there was a reason for that. There's still a reason for that. But that doesn't give anybody the right to go in their private lives and while they're changing or while they're doing a shoot and film things like was done in this at all. I don't see even a close similarity there.
Yeah, you look pretty good in your tight pants, by the way, too. When you took your pants, you look pretty good.
I wore the tight pants as much as I could into work for you every day.
So, Al, listen, people have gone back and forth, and this is just your personal opinion about Gruden and, what he said opposite, the kind of coach that he was, the kind of commentator that he was, and you getting all these people that are, essentially saying he was a great guy, he was an amazing coach. As a former player, what do you do with it? How do you see that? Obviously, it's been 20 years, but you're sitting there as a former player, and that was a coach. He said what he said. How do you reconcile that, or how does a player reconcile that in their head?
And what do you do with Jon Gruden from this point on? Do you want to see him come back, and what does he got to do to make it right?
Those are all really good questions that honestly I've thought about the last couple of days. Tony, you and I talked about it yesterday. Does this mean that he's done coaching forever, from commentating forever? We've all seen that certain things that people have done in the past, time kind of lets everybody ease up what their initial thoughts were about it, and people have been let back into certain aspects of their job. I really don't know right now where this does send him, just because of where we are as a society now with the issues that we're talking about here. Again, these emails were leaked from that investigation into the Washington football team. So it just makes you wonder, hey, this is perfect as to what's taboo in society today. It's a guy that's, presently a coach in the NFL. This is a big story. So now it's leaked, and unfortunately for Jon Gruden, it's kind of ended his coaching career, I think.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No,
I think it's interesting because obviously Derek Carr came out. Several of his players said, listen, we have coaches back. And I understand the players are always going to have their coaches back. Hell, you look at the Mike Price situation. He never coached a game. And I didn't think he'd get fired just because there were so many players saying, please don't fire Mike Price. We think he's the right guy for the job. And obviously we knew what happened there. And so I certainly understand that camaraderie and understand that respect that we have for coaches. And I try to look at the whole canvas. We always talk about the whole canvas of life, whether you want to talk about Joe Paterno or anyone else. And it's unfortunate when the last thing you do is this. And sometimes it's going to be really difficult to come back and get in the good graces. And I don't know, if this was a crime where Jon Gruden's got to spend 6 months behind bars like a Michael Vick and you've paid your time, I think we're much more responsive to allowing them to have a second shot. When it's something that you don't really know how you're going to discipline yourself through, we don't ever know if you've changed. And again, this was over a 7-year period. And we don't know if it happened before 2011 or anytime after 2018. It's unfortunate. And the fact that he's lost basically everything from a professional standpoint that he's fought for, whether it's be the Ring of Honor in Tampa Bay or whether it be on the Madden games or anything else, is real unfortunate for him. And it was a dumb mistake. It was a stupid mistake. He made a major mistake, and he got burned for it. And I have a feeling that maybe some more people will get burned for it too. I also understand the National Football League not wanting to release these 650,000 emails.
Sure.
Because it's damage control. I mean, if all of a sudden you have a restaurant and you're selling chicken with salmonella, you're going to make it sound like it's a much smaller issue than making 11 people sick at lunch. So, and you're going to try to get through it, damage control, and you're going to try to move on.
Well, and I also think that we need to kind of look at it from the perspective, as I said before, back in my years, nobody had come out and expressed homosexuality or any of that. So again, people were saying stuff in the locker room, not knowing that they were actually affecting somebody that may have been in the locker room. I don't know of any teammates I had that ever came out after we had played or while we had played or any of that. But I do think where Jon Gruden's concerned now is we live in an era where that's just not acceptable anymore. And you're accountable for your actions. And in this particular case, how can you have a guy remain as a head coach or rehire him as a head coach, knowing that these things were once a part of, his demeanor, I guess is the best way to put it. I know certainly if there were players out there that had issues with this, there's probably a trust factor going forward with him as your head coach. And it's just, it's unfortunate that it happened, but he put the emails out there. They were sentiments that he expressed to others. And again, the world we live in today, it's not acceptable for that stuff like it once was.
By the way,
I shouldn't say acceptable back then, but it wasn't looked on the same way.
Yeah. That's good. I just saw a story this morning that came out that Colin Kaepernick still gets up at 5:00 every morning and trains and hopes to play in the National Football League one day. I just thought I'd throw a little nugget at you, Al.
Was that a question?
No. No, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it's interesting because in the National Football League, you never know. Al, thank you, man, so much. I love you, and I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for talking to us about what happens in the locker room behind the scenes, and we'll catch up soon.
You bet. You guys are two of my favorite people. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Al. There is Al Greco, 20-year vet in the National Football League, talking about.
That's why I love him. He says it like it is.
And I know his heart, so I know he's not going to put his foot in his mouth. But he did. He said it several times. It's a different time. It's unfortunate we have to say it's a different time because it's always been wrong. And, to go back to the cheerleader situation, I used to do contests at nightclubs in this town, Jitterbugs, the Studio, Senior Frog, blah, 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 blah. And there were a lot of times where women wouldn't want to change clothes. And in every bar I worked in, there was a room that was usually like a liquor closet where the girls, if they were doing the Miss Hawaiian Tropic Beauty pageant, they had to put clothes on, they had to change it, and they put oil on them, whatever, to look as good as they possibly could. There was never a doorknob.
Yeah.
There was always a hole in the door, and every girl knew it. And it was it's unfortunate, it's creepy. There'd be it was Porky's. There was a line of dudes waiting their shot to look to that and it's disgusting, but that's certainly just so I feel like we're moving in the right direction. But it's unfortunate that it takes this type of stuff for us to finally make that move.
Man, I appreciate what he said, because I'm like, well, this is I don't like it was a different time. It was, but as Al said, these were your sentiments, and whether it was then or now, they weren't right.
Yep.
I think, and the only other thing I'll say is, and this is why I'm glad he said it from a player's perspective, if you're one of the representatives, one of the groups that he's making the comments about in writing, and he has never made it to you, I mean, if it's me, there is a trust factor now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, I appreciate Al saying both sides of it and sort of telling it like it is. We can speculate all day long. This is a guy who's been in the locker room, and that makes a big difference.